Hi, it's Kim Weeks with Weeks Well. This is the second in a string of events this week from Weeks Well events. And as many of you know, logging in, we are now doing these two series on Weeks Well. One is called Yoga Lineages, and we're exploring and really deeply probing the question in 2022, what yoga lineage is and why it matters. And that is exactly in pace with a conversation that we're doing, a series called Fostering Transformation, Yoga and Equity. And today is May the 11th, which means it's the fifth month of the year, which means we're in our fifth conversation on yoga and equity on Weeks Well events for this year. And I'm joined by Matthew Sanford, who is, for anybody who's practiced yoga for like 20 or more years, I'm in that category. Matthew Sanford is so well known and has done so many things in his still quite, I'm sure, short life. Long life, but it hasn't gone on that long, not yet. I'm sure you're just getting started, Matthew. He's an award-winning author. We'll have links all the way through the session so you can go and check out his books, and I hope you buy them. And he's also the founder of and he's an Iyengar Yoga teacher, which is one of the reasons why I'm excited to kind of geek out on that level for anybody on the call, as we were discussing before, if you are an Iyengar Yoga teacher or student or whatever. But he's the founder of the nonprofit Mind Body Solutions, which I'm looking forward to hearing a lot about, because Matthew and I have also been having these other tendrils of conversations about the yoga business, the yoga community, the yoga industry, and what modern yoga really is. And I know we're not going to talk about lineage today, Matthew, but still we share a lineage, interestingly, and we have really interesting perspectives on that lineage from really different places. So this is a 75-minute call. And as you've seen from the, promotions and stuff like that, we want you to come ready to practice. So Matthew's going to be lecturing. We're going to be talking. Please ask any Q&As. You can put your questions into the Q&A box. And the chat box, which you see, it's all down there at the bottom of your screen. It might be in the upper right-hand corner if you're looking in from your phone. I think there's the three dots up there. But based on your interface, you'll be able to find the chat and the Q&A. And the chat is from us to you, and the Q&A is from you to us. So we'll be watching and looking, and we can't wait for the questions. As I was telling Matthew before the call started, we want to welcome all the people who are watching on recording, because we're seeing that lots of you register and then watch or listen to the session later. So you can always engage with us on the survey that we post in the YouTube notes and in this call, to tell us what you think about the call, what we could do better, what you want to know more of, because we are just booking yoga lineages and fostering transformation out all the way into the summer and beyond, because the conversations just keep mushrooming. We're like in a forest of discovery of so many different things that we really need to look at and think about and talk about and practice, which is something I was talking to Stephen Cope about just this morning. And so we're going to ask a couple of questions of you all on the call. We have 3 poll questions. So you'll see one come up really quick. And as soon as we're done with that, I'm going to hand you over to Matthew. So the first question is, let's see, I'm waiting. Okay, are you a yoga student, a yoga teacher, or both? And as a couple people from the call yesterday said, including Molly McManus, the chairwoman of the board of IAYT, if you're a yoga teacher, you're obviously also a yoga student. So we might just say, are you a student or a yoga teacher? Because implicit in the yoga teacher, it's sort of both, right? And so anyway, the next question is, I'm just closing this one out. I think it's, how did you hear about this session? From our newsletter, from other sources, or from social media? We'd love to know how, because we're trying to just reach as many people as we can, as effectively as we can, so that we can foster transformation, because that's our goal. So I think I just ended the poll accidentally, Alyssa, sorry. The majority were yoga teachers, Matthew, to the question that you asked previously. Right. And so now this is Matthew. I'm going to turn it over, and and so anyway, I'm so glad to see everybody. I'm going to be on mute for some of the time, but if you have questions on the Q&A, please bring them in. Matthew and I are just going to have a dialogue.
Don't mute yourself yet for a second.
What's that?
Don't mute yourself yet.
Okay.
It's an honor to be here, and I'm glad to share what equity and inclusivity might mean when it's more directly applied to asana and pranayama. But I do this thing that unfortunately you're going to be the only one that can respond to me, Kim. During the pandemic, I start every yoga class with what I call lyrical name that tune, right? So I give you a line from a song, and unfortunately you're the only one that's going to get this. And this might even be before your time because I'm older than you. The song begins, I built me a raft and she's ready for floating. Old Mississippi, she's calling my name.
Oh no.
Blackfish are jumping. Is that ringing a bell? It's,
you know, people can come in on the Q&A and tell us.
yeah. So I built me a raft and she's ready for, it comes from the 70s, by the way, so beware. I built me a raft and she's ready for floating.
Yeah.
Old Mississippi, she's calling my name. Catfish are jumping, and then the name of the song, Black Waters.
Oh.
If you don't know this song by the Doobie Brothers, right? It's a great song. I remember when I first heard it when I was 10.
10,
the very first time I heard this song.
Yeah.
And the reason why I bring up this song,
I was recording Lionel Richie on the radio to my tape recorder. So that's where I started it.
Yeah. So the thing about I built me a raft is that one of the things that you need to make universal about an asana practice and about any kind of yogic exploration is it really is like creating your own raft. And this is something that you can share with anybody. Like, so it's not just a set of skills. It's not just a set of techniques. It's a raft, right? And the great thing about rafts is it can take all different types of water and all different types of positions and it moves around and all those things. Your yoga practice is a raft. And I really think that when you're trying to make yoga more, quote, accessible or inclusive, right? You all as practitioners and teachers need to think about what are the really deep things you've gained and simple things that you've gained from your yoga practice, and how do you pass it on? Right? The raft that you all have built, right, and constructed and practiced into existence is not the only way rafts are built, right? And so, you know, I'm an Iyengar teacher, but if you don't know, full disclosure, I get around in a wheelchair. So I've been practicing yoga since I was 25, 31 years, right? I was injured when I was 13. I was in a car accident that killed my father and sister, and I woke up to a completely different world. And basically, the medical model, with good intentions, guided me to make my upper body really strong because I'm paralyzed from the chest down, and drag my paralyzed body through life. It was a model of compensation because they couldn't fix my spinal cord, right? It's severed, and so they felt bad. So they thought, because of their awareness of what's possible as sensation within the whole body, they assumed that sensation below my point of injury, as they define sensation, right, wasn't possible. And so my only option was to overcome and compensate, to take my body as an object, right? And that's not a great integrative approach. And I don't want to get into this whole side of the conversation, but unless your questions take me this way, but like our nervous system is wired for many different kinds of sensation, and that physical overt sensation is only one of them, right? And that yoga, among a whole bunch of other things that it is, and asana and pranayama practice, are actually giving you access to different parts of your nervous system, that they're actually time-tested, talk about lineage, right? We come here on the shoulders of giants. The great thing about knowing, regardless if you have a particular lineage, that honestly, someone's been there before you, there being wherever you are in your practice, somebody's already been there, and that's a wonderful thing, right? But that there are other parts and accesses. Human consciousness and is so dynamic and so subtle that there are multiple ways to live in your body and to inhabit your body. And a lot of these deeper, more subtle ways are being utilized by yoga. And so when you start to think, what I want to do today is give you some ideas about taking what you already know from your yoga practice and maybe thinking about it a little bit differently, right? And emphasize different parts of your practice sometimes. And I mean that sometimes. So you start to experience what I might call, but I'm biased, the heart of yoga, right? Which is something that runs deeper than the actual physical poses. It runs differently than the philosophical implications and the whole belief system, that I believe fundamentally that what's being passed down through lineage is a set of experiences that once you start to experience on a consistent level, it transforms you. Now, what about that is exclusive? No, it's whether we can create the set of experiences for somebody else that allows them to recognize beyond the level of a simple belief, allows them to recognize how connected they are to the space around them, right? And it's not, sure, they're yamas and niyamas. They're like, you know, there's a lot of ways to think about that as moral commandments, all sorts of things. But honestly, it's way more than what's great, I think, and so potentially transformative about yoga and asana and pranayama in particular, because that's going to be my focus today, is that it's based on a set of experiences, right? And then it transforms a practitioner. And I think it's too bad if you, in my opinion, if you, as a teacher, my goal, and this is a thing for you teachers on the call, are you going to be in your teaching, are you going to be a gatekeeper or a door opener? Right? Because I believe all you can really do as a yoga teacher is open the door to certain experiences and witness your students' transformation to the other side of the door. And the other door never closes behind you. Your practice is always your practice. Your lineage is always your practice. But you open the door to a much bigger expanse. Mm-hmm. That experience is accessible to everybody. Mm-hmm. Now, one of the things I say when I train people, teachers that teach people of all abilities, because I've been doing that for 25 years, is I say that the principles of yoga don't discriminate, but yoga poses do. Mm-hmm. So that's like, when you start to take that in, like, what are the principles upon which asana functions? What are some of the things in the teaching that are beyond the particular pose, that are making those poses and those movements possible? And can you pass those on? So I know this seems strange, but
yeah, let's pause on that. Will you say that again? I think that's an very important point, just worth repeating.
That what
so use what I, so this is good. What I heard you say was that the principles of yoga
don't discriminate. The principles of asana in particular, they don't discriminate, but yoga poses do.
Right. The principles of yoga asana don't discriminate, but the poses do.
Yeah. So, like, obviously, I'm not going to, as a T4 paraplegic, I'm not going to be able to very easily, if ever, get upside down into Sirsasana. Mm-hmm. Right. But does that mean that so that pose on some real practical physical level discriminates against the body that I have? Right. But does that mean I can't get access to the happening of Sirsasana? Mm-hmm. And the answer is no. Right. It means you have to think about what and experience Sirsasana from different directions. Right. And start to recognize that the particular form of poses are not what was trying to be revealed. Mm-hmm. They were at best a vehicle of something else. Mm-hmm. And so the couple things I want to back up again. I want to disclose that I'm an Iyengar teacher. So I've been trained in being really precise with and the level. I think one of the amazing things that rocks me about Iyengar Yoga is the level of precision and complication in any simple action. Mm-hmm. Right? Remember, because Iyengar is teaching the entire world, so the
Right.
most objective things he knows that he shares with every student,
Right.
or shared with every student, was the physical body. The rest is less tangible.
Mhm.
And so his emphasis on the particularity of the poses is a method, but not necessarily all that he was teaching.
Of course.
Right. And you know, I'm a certified Iyengar teacher because it was conferred on me, not because I could do all the rigor of everything else. So I often take that as an indication that his system was never composed of the parts that look like you have to be tested on, that there's wisdom and other types of learning in it. And not just with Iyengar yoga, but I think this is a crucial way in which you make yoga more accessible, is you start to recognize the way sensation and awareness travel through the body,
Mhm.
and that the way that you've been taught asana is only one of many ways that that awareness can travel through the mind-body relationship.
Mhm.
Like, for example, one of the really, and I'm gonna give like examples, and it's going to be a quilt, and hopefully by the end the different patches will end up being a whole quilt for you, is like, there's no, one of the things you learn from inversions is something very deep, I think, about existence, is that your body position doesn't matter as much as you think.
Oh my God, it's so true. You're
Yeah, so
so
what it's
right
trying
about
to
that.
show you is your head could be by your feet, or
Right.
your feet could be where your head is, and the flow of prana and the way it manifests is not going to be changed. I like to say some goofy things to myself sometimes. Like, I think that the yogis got bored, like they were
Of
sitting
course.
on the ground
Of
in,
course.
in Padmasana, and they went,
Yeah.
wait. And
Yeah.
and I think it's not a coincidence that their spine was very connected to the ground when this happened. And they start to recognize certain positions like fanas, and then they think, okay, there's an unchanging reality here that doesn't conform to my senses. So I'm going to get up and try to see if I can stay connected to what's unchanging while my body is changing its position. Your breath does a lot of things, but one of the things it fundamentally does is introduce movement and change into the overall experience of human being, right? So what's at the, I think, even a deeper level of what asana is teaching you, is that the particular orientation of your body is not as important as the realization of the prana itself.
Of course. Can we back up a step? Because I want to sort of stop, dropping. So one of the pieces of feedback I'm getting on the webinars that I'm doing is people love to have points in time to be like, okay, here's what we've talked about so far. Like I'm a little resistant to like a PowerPoint presentation in this format, just so you all know, because I kind of want it to. I was just having a pre-call for the event, the lineages event we're doing in June, and we were just talking about if we could just bottle this experience right now, and frankly, the speeding up of the connections that, like, Ryan and I made. Ryan McGraw, for those who may have gone to his chair yoga class a couple of weeks ago and his presentation on accessibility yoga. And that actually was an amazing presentation. That should have had a PowerPoint slide, because he was laying out the sort of history, the social policy aspects, and the sort of truth aspects of like whether yoga studios and the yoga studios, like the actual, like, are there, stairs blocking me from going in if I am not able to walk up them type
Mhm.
questions, like fundamental. So what I heard from the beginning of the call, Matthew, is you talking about how the principles of yoga have universal application. And I'm going to insert just one clause here, so, sort of have issue with it or not. But the interpretation, the application, and the manifestation in modern yoga of it being so pose centric, and the poses, all of them themselves, are necessarily not accessible.
Not all of them, not all the techniques, yeah. And
Right.
so
Inclusive is what you said, I think. Hold on.
there are, I
Oh,
think,
discriminate. They discriminate. They use
right.
the word discriminate.
Yeah, and that ultimately particular poses require certain types of movement in a way
Right.
that the realization doesn't. So like, for example, what do I mean? So we got to tie this down a little bit, and I want to make it.
Yeah. Can
Okay,
we tie it down, but also talk about the breath?
no, not
Okay.
yet.
Okay.
Right? No. Okay. So, but like, for example, and we will get to the breath in a second, right? Um, um, if you think about, everyone stand up for a second.
Okay. I'm gonna change my screen so you can see me standing.
Yeah. This is a shorter one.
Good.
Um,
Sorry.
So there are things that are occurring in asana all the time where you're practicing different ways of perceiving, right? So if you stand in mountain pose, Tadasana, right? So you're standing in mountain pose, right? And I ask you to balance on the four corners of your feet. But then I give you a stranger instruction like balance your head over your neck. Okay. And so now as you hit down, rise up, do what you know about Tadasana, fill the vessel from inside out. So you're being more aware of the activation of your muscles and things. But now I want you to balance in the whole room. Right? So I want you to practice proprioception, not just interoception. So you're staying solid in your base, but you're staying connected to the whole room. But now what I want you to do is, everyone that's staying in Tadasana, I want you to keep your heels down, but I want you to take more weight onto the balls of your feet. Like you're about to fall forward, but don't fall forward. Right? So you come forward onto the balls of your feet. Are you more or less connected to the room right now? And although you're physically more active, you're less connected to the empty space in the room, right?
Can I say I'm differently connected though? Can I ask you a question?
Not yet. Go back. Let me keep teaching, right?
Okay.
All right. So now I want you to go. So I want you to go feet in Tadasana and then go more weight on the heels, like you're going to fall backward, and watch how your mind has to jump in to make sure you don't fall.
Yeah.
Now come into the center of the four corners of your feet, right? Hit down and rise up, and recognize your ability to receive the rest of the room while putting effort into your body has enhanced, right? Conditions of safety must be met in order to feel the subtlety of the poses. That is actually one of the principles. Now, so your mind actually, right, has to actually have certain conditions met in order for you to explore. So super complicated poses tend not to teach as much yoga. They tend to be a measure of yogic realization, maybe, right? But they're not actually having a lot of teaching chops. My point is when you balanced on the four corners of your feet, on a very simple level, you are being asked to practice Pratyahara. You started to go inward, right? You started to feel.
So let's define for the audience Pratyahara.
Well, Pratyahara is like being able to withdraw from your senses, going to that more grounded felt space, less judgmental space, literally withdrawing from your senses maybe. But when you went to the four corners of your feet, I know when you balance on the four corners of your feet, you're probably not going to want to read a novel at the same time. There's going to be a withdraw into the sensations of the body. So, but the idea is that Pratyahara, or the ability to not be as completely engaged with the outer senses, is a principle in every yoga pose, right? It can be passed on. Another simple principle that I think all yoga poses trade on is a very simple notion of you have to go down in order to go up. Now that's going to be happening in virtually every yoga pose, right? I may not be able to teach you the down to go up, upside down in Sirsasana because of what your body is, but if I can show you how to go down to go up in a variety of contexts, I've passed on the realization that Sirsasana in one way is passing up. Another universal principle of asana might be you have to go in to go out. So Kim, will you go back to your spot and get a block? So in a lot of poses, right, you're trying to help the student actually.
And we should tell everybody, sorry, I just want to say, we decided to make me the model so that if you all have any questions, so so in other words, that's how we're doing it on your screen. I hope it's helpful for you. We're interested.
It is for me at least, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so if you put the block on the floor between your ankles.
Which way? This way?
The long way. Yeah.
The very long way?
No. So it's on its side. So here's a book, Kim. It'd be like this.
Oh, like this. Okay.
Yeah, or on the inside of the foot, right? So the idea is that the in to go out, when you can help a student feel his or her midline,
yeah,
you're going to help expansion out through the limbs, right?
Okay.
So, and there's a part of the experience in asana that's actually more received than it is assertive. So as you stand there in Tadasana, don't squeeze the block yet, right?
Okay.
So lay it on its long side, Kim.
Long side.
No, on its side.
On the side? Long side?
Long this way, long, like straight line.
Long side?
No, there's one you haven't tried. Now flip it on its side now. From there.
Oh, like that, okay.
Yeah. Okay. So people that are doing that right now at home, right? If you actually start to squeeze the block,
Mm-hmm.
do you notice that your chest lifts? Right? Like now don't squeeze the block and watch gravity drop.
Oh, yeah.
So now when you squeeze the block, follow the sensation upward.
Yep.
Right?
Do you call it rebound?
Sure. I mean, it can be whatever we're doing. My point is that in every asana, you're doing an action and you're receiving something else. Mm-hmm. This is one of the principles. So now what's interesting is that if you squeeze the block, keep squeezing the block, but now start to squeeze it too hard.
Okay. Right?
And as you start to overwork, notice that you're less connected to the whole room or differently connected. I'm okay saying less, but I think that you're more willful when you're over squeezing the block and you're less receiving of the expanse of the empty space in the room, right? But now, and then release, don't squeeze the block too hard. So there's diminishing return on physical effort.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? So in every pose, you're trying to find the sweet range of action and of effort, right? That's a universal principle. What you're going to find with a lot of students, traditional students that are type A, they're going to overwork and hold their breath. But you're going to especially find it with people with disabilities because they're trained to overwork, right? That's how we keep up, the royal we of disability, right? And so this idea of passing on a sweet zone of action where you're not losing parts of the pose, that would be a universal principle in an asana.
Did you say paxing? What was the word you just used?
I'm not sure. Not paxing.
You were saying something. I don't know if you heard it. You can chat it maybe, but you said something. I think it was basically about the law of diminishing returns on physical.
That there's a sweet zone of action.
Yes, the sweet zone of action.
That this is something you can pass on. Yeah. Is that over efforting will actually disconnect the practitioner from their experience and from the space around them. Right. And so you're trying to but then if you're not activating your legs at all into Tadasana,
but then under efforting
part of the pose.
Right.
Right. So there's always a zone. Yeah. Another universal principle in asana would be a lifted chest. Almost in every pose you're lifting your chest. Have you thought about, everyone in the call, why you're lifting your chest?
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And not only is there days of trying to learn and years of figuring out how to lift your chest effectively, but why fundamentally do we do it? Right. Yeah. Well, if you think about what you're experiencing, it distributes awareness to the limbs. Right. So this
also to the legs.
Right. And so when you drop here, right, you withdraw from the limbs, right? So this starts to expand.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
this is one of the core actions.
Yep.
And it's also why one of the reasons why shoulder stand is so important. Because shoulder stand is lifting your chest,
Yeah. Right.
right? While upside down, while your mind's disoriented in
Yeah.
space, right? And so you start to recognize that if I'm just trying to get across, like say Sarvangasana or shoulder stand,
Yeah.
and I'm stuck by the physicalness of it and the orientation of it, I'm not going to be able to make it universal. But there
Mhm.
are things happening in Sirsasana or Sarvangasana that are super important, that go into why it's often called the queen of all yoga poses,
Mhm.
that I could figure out how to pass on, right?
Totally.
So this idea that there are ways to pass on. Like one time I read in Gita Iyengar's preliminary course book that you actually teach beginners standing poses to help them synchronize the movement of their joints.
Yeah.
Okay, so think about you jump or step your feet wide,
Yep.
like all that stuff. Well, I can teach joint awareness without people having to jump or step their feet wide.
Mhm.
So if you start hearing past the fact that
Mhm.
it takes arms and legs wide in order and turning one
Uh-huh.
foot in, one foot out, which is something that traditional students have to do a lot. They often don't synchronize the movement of their joints.
Not at
And the
all.
poses get
That's
really
the problem.
swampy.
Honestly, that is the fundamental problem that's the fundamental physical problem in modern Vinyan yoga. It's
Yeah.
that joint movement is not synchronized, A to B, B to C, C to D. And so it is not a sustainable practice for people as they age. Not,
I think there's a lot to that. But
Mhm.
and I think being able to teach joint awareness,
Mhm.
which
Totally.
makes sense from a physiological point of view, right? Because there's more receptors for the brain in your joints,
Right.
right? And so by teaching joint awareness and joint lightness and not exploiting your joints,
Right.
right? You're
For the,
actually
yeah.
teaching a really important insight about spaciousness
Yeah.
that needs to fill every vessel and actually helps your breath.
Of course.
So again, I just want to go through some quick examples of
Yeah.
ways and principles that run through poses that make poses possible. And what's so fascinating about teaching people of varying abilities,
Yeah.
not and disabilities, right, is that it makes you have to really think about what you've been receiving from your own practice,
Ugh.
right? And from a different point of view, because it was never just about whether you could do Trikanasana, right? It was like what's happening in their different poses and how might I pass them on. So at Mind Body Solutions, when I help teachers teach people with disabilities,
Do we have that link? Have we sent it?
mindbodysolutions.org if you don't,
Okay.
but
Yep.
that we're trying to actually help the teachers practice what I'm calling the subtle body. Okay, so this is, I want to step back and do some kind of hard definitions, right?
Please.
That yoga is a lot of things, and there's never one way to describe anything. But one of the ways that I like to define asana is you're trying to yoke together what you can feel and control with what you can't feel and can't control. Okay, so like the center joint, in this empty space in the center of your joints, the way your bones deliver prana, you don't get as much control over your bones, for example, as you do your muscles and ligaments.
Totally.
That every student is continually confronted with integrating what they can feel and control. Asana gives you a sense of being able to control everything, which is an illusion, right? Right? What you can feel and control with what you can't feel and you can't control. For this reason, I often find that my adaptive students are better yoga students because they're much more comfortable allowing that they don't get to control everything, that they have to receive the poses, not just do them, right? Because really, to me, asana is a practice of congruence. Can you get your body to be more congruent with the flow of prana that's passing through here? And when you start to see how poses function beyond their particular form, you start to see that you're getting passed down secrets of how to have life force travel through you, right? And so, for example, a universal principle of yoga, which I think is something that, remember, this is how what I've had to learn from my Iyengar Yoga because of my unique situation. Alignment creates an effortless form of mind-body integration.
Say that again.
Alignment creates an effortless form of mind-body integration. So go back to your spot, Kim. So just to get people on the call to feel what I'm talking about. All right, so we're going to Trikanasana.
Okay.
Right? So jump or step your feet wide, take your arms wide. Good wide stance. You can tell. Turn the left foot in, right foot out. Okay, so, there are a lot of really good instructions here, right?
There's apparently over 300.
Yeah, so, but like one of the things that I want to emphasize here is the way that you have to hit down through the front leg and lift the kneecap up towards the hip socket. So inside side of the front foot. So you activate your leg, right? Your front leg. And I want you to take the whole inner thigh away from the back leg, right? So both those actions have to balance. So energy travels up and down your spine and out through your arms, right? But now I want you to do something, come on down into Trikanasana, right? And now I want you to do something wrong, right? I want you to, instead of rotating your belly up towards the ceiling, I want you to roll your belly towards the floor and watch how much heavier gravity gets. Yep. Right? As you roll your spine open, you actually start to have the energy of the room flow better through you. Yeah. Right. Good. And then come on up. And then turn your feet straight ahead and turn the other way. So you can do this the other side. But this idea that a little change of alignment can completely affect your experience of prana. So like letting your belly fall here a little bit in Trikanasana makes your muscles have to engage, makes the grip, makes the receiving less. Yeah. So the instruction of rotating your belly up towards the ceiling was never an action in itself. It was to plug you in better to the flow of energy in the pose.
Wait, what did you just say? Wait, I'm sorry. I heard that. Everybody else heard it too. Say it again.
So the rolling the belly up towards the ceiling was never a physical instruction on its own. It was trying to plug you in to a more fluid place of prana movement. Right. Now, there are a lot of ways that you can have this experience, right? And so this idea that some sort of alignment creates a sensation of relief in poses, although it might be physically hard to do, that alignment itself distributes prana through the system, right? That's universal. Now, how you create the conditions of whether it's through muscular action or adjustment or whatever, of that release of what I'm gonna, the subtle body disguises itself as relief, right? As like an opening or a flow through the pose, right? That's the universal principle, right? Like that, creating that happening for your student or in your own practice, that's what you're aiming for, right? So there's a couple, I hope you're willing to do dog pose, Kim, but there are a couple, and everyone on the call, right?
I am. I'm probably going to have to, I think I'm going to have to do it. Yes, I'm willing to do dog pose, a costume change. I don't analyze anybody at home.
I'll keep talking for a second. Yeah, I'll keep talking for a second while you costume change.
Yeah, so let me take a moment here because we're halfway through the session, and we have and I'm sure engaged audience. So I'm gonna do costume change, and while we do that, I would love for you to summarize where we've gone. Like, just I can try to tell you what I've heard you say, the main points.
No, I'll say it again.
And then and please, whoever has questions, I think this is a good time to put some questions in while you're asking them. I'll be back in a second, okay? So yeah, go ahead. So summarize and I'll give me two.
Yep. So part of what I was trying to get across here is that I'm not trying to introduce anything new to what you know about yoga. It's taking what you know and thinking about it a little bit differently. So the idea that particular poses where as a paraplegic, I may never be able to do headstand or Shirsasana, there are things that are making Shirsasana an important pose that are universal. And I've tried to summarize some of them. There are a lot more of them, in my opinion. But like down to go up, in to go out. And alignment is an effortless form of mind-body integration. A lifted chest is in virtually every pose because it distributes awareness to the limbs. Things I haven't overtly said are and that there's a sweet range of optimal effort in a pose. Over effort has a diminishing returns. Under effort has diminishing returns, but there's a sweet spot of action or range of action is another principle. So there are a variety of things that what I want for the people on the call is to start practicing this way once in a while, to think about what are the core sensations that you're experiencing in a pose, because the sensations themselves and the access to the prana, the principles which make that possible, are actually universal. So getting back to, like, again, this is where I'm getting into the more experiential part, because I want you just to feel these things, right? So there's an incredible line from B.K. Iyengar, which I would say is another principle of how, or at least has been for me, about how asana functions. And that is in Tree of Yoga, he says somewhere that, and actually in the section on grace, that you only need two things for a yoga pose: a center of gravity and a sense of direction. So when you were in mountain pose, Tadasana, and I was having you be too much weight to the balls of the feet, or too much weights on the heel, I was violating both conditions, because I was taking you off your center of gravity, right? The sense of direction in the pose, like how the pose unfolds itself, was lost. When you were just in Trikanasana and I had you fall your stomach forward and you had to grip up to hold the pose then, right? Your center of gravity was off because you had to work against falling forward. But the sense of the flow of the whole pose also got injured or got changed, and it lost a sense of direction. So I remember when I first read this line in Tree of Yoga, I remember thinking, oh my goodness, that's so great for a paraplegic because he never says muscular action, right? And so this is happening all the time in yoga poses. So if you do dog pose now, Kim, that would be great.
Hold on, yeah, I'm going, yeah, and I'm just sending Tree of Yoga by B.K. Iyengar. I don't know if people on the call have heard about it, but it's such a great book, and it's the last two, his Tree of Yoga and Light on Life, I would imagine you agree, are in some ways like undersung by the current sort of school and its community as being just as important as Light on Yoga. I wish that were a more like elevated study of his work. But anyway, so down dog, just in the middle, regular, sideways or head on?
Yeah, sideways.
Okay.
So I just want everyone to do downward facing dog right now.
Thank goodness I got a new yoga mat yesterday. These yoga mats I brought from Washington, D.C. to this like dry place. I don't know what happened, but they were sliding all over. Anyway, so I got a new mat that won't slide.
So this would be empirical evidence of the profundity of that line, center of direction, center of gravity, sense of direction, center of gravity. So do your normal dog pose, right? And everyone just feel what that feels like. Okay, so now don't keep your hands in the same place. Don't bring them any closer together, but bring your fingers together. So your fingers go together. And just notice how much heavier the pose gets. Now open your fingers and open your palms and follow that energy out to the outside of your hips towards where the ceiling hits the wall. right? And again, unfortunately, the mind learns better from losing stuff. So bring your fingers back together again and watch the pose become purely physical.
Yeah, it hurts. I don't like
And
it.
then open the fingers and the palms and follow the sense of direction. And learn how your effort and the physical instructions were trying to support the sense of direction,
Oh, yeah.
not create them.
Yeah.
Right? Good. And then come on down to child's pose.
Yeah. Say that again. I think that's a good.
So I think that there's a level in B.K. Iyengar's teaching that's at this level that the sense of direction in a pose is not created by your physical actions, but the instructions themselves are trying to help you follow and guide the sense of direction that's occurring in the pose. And so, like, when your fingers were together, the pose got super heavy and your muscles lost some of their unity and their work together. It's no longer like a symphony as much, and you're having to hold steady, right? And then when you open your fingers and your palms and you felt it get lighter up through your legs, and then your legs have to catch it and land it, so the energy of your spine continues skyward. That was the sense of direction in downward facing dog, and it's not created by the actions, but the actions are a following of the sense of direction. Now, this is going to be true in every yoga pose, right? And it doesn't mean you don't have to effort in poses, but the repetition of asana is to train your muscles to be able to receive better, not to create something. So now think about how universal that is, right? And can I pass down now? Most of my students can't get that extreme of a contrast between when you open and when you close. And I remember in the first year I did yoga, I remember reading a line from B.K. Iyengar that dog pose is entirely mirrored in your hands. I've been following that for 30 years, right? Trying to learn about how that would be true. How it's not like it's always true, like center of gravity, sense of direction, but it is. You have to live into some of the wisdom of the yoga instructions, right? Now that's an appetite I can help create for any student in asana, regardless of whether they can do all the poses. So one of the things that I think makes asana universal is if you are able to share the wonder of what you received without it being dependent on how you got it, right? And this idea that it's amazing when someone realizes, for example, if the idea that one of the core sensations in every pose would be the sensation of grounding. So, and this happens in your poses all the time. If you try to do Trikanasana without engaging your legs, you're going to hurt your back, right? But if I take my arms wide like this, right, and I can lift my chest and do other things, do what I'm supposed to do. If somebody comes up and a yoga teacher comes up and gets down on the ground and pushes in on my knees, right? So if my arms are wide and they come and push right in here, guess what's going to happen? My arms are going to get lighter, right? The effortfulness of the pose is going to change because the grounding has increased. So there's another crucial line that B.K. Iyengar draws attention to in translation of the Yoga Sutras, which is when effortful effort becomes effortless. That's something I can pass on. The instructions, although they're on the upfront, they might take more effort. They're usually trying to create an effortlessness, right? And so this is also one of the ways. Now, here's another way in which asana is universal. I know all of you, if you've gone to classes when they were in person, right, you've all had like a really good adjustment, and all of a sudden the pose all of a sudden, and I don't mean an adjustment as a correction, I mean like And all of a sudden the pose just opens. Like you start to feel a different experience in the pose. I remember the first time I met my yoga teacher, she said to me, Matt, there's bad stretching, there's good stretching, and then there's yoga. And any practitioner on the call knows when something goes from good stretching to yoga. There's something more that happens. Like it's not just that you're stretching the muscle. Something's getting received that's more deeper and more subtle, and actually is kind of beyond words, right? That's why you do asana, right? That level of receiving the pose, right? Of it's more than the actions. I want to teach all of my students, and also in my own practice, what's the transition? What does yoga feel like when it hits that sweet spot? When something goes from good stretching to yogic, that's something I want to pass on to my students, right? Because they're going to have to explore. Like a lot of when I teach people with disabilities, a lot of them will never have a coordinated movement. Will never be able to balance whatever, but I can teach them the sensations of those poses. So when we're teaching yoga to be universal, rather than thinking about individual poses, we're thinking about what are the core sensations that are universal in poses. And in my opinion, there's a lot of ways you could say this, but one's grounding. If you're off balance, if you're not grounded, you're actually going to have a hard time receiving the pose. So grounding, the sensation of expansion. So like the difference in Tadasana of when you squeeze the block and when you didn't, when you were able to activate your legs, right, and squeeze the block, you felt an expansion up through your chest, right? So the sensation of grounding, the sensation of expansion, your mind can't deal with expansion if it's off balance. So I'm always going to try to teach balance in poses, especially for people that have unequal bases.
Are you saying that grounding and balance are the same?
They're similar. I don't think they're the same.
Not the same. Okay, I want to clarify that.
Increasing grounding almost always increases balance.
Yeah.
But balance also, we think about balance as not just a physical accomplishment, like, Vrksasana or tree pose, but balance being also an equal distribution of presence within the body.
I want to pin prana because I just want to make sure people on the call understand. I mean, you're rooting so much of what you're saying in that word, which I'm sure most people on the call have some sense of or feeling about, or could define if we just asked. But it might be worth defining that. And, just to say any questions, we'd love to know your name. We'd love to know who you are if you have things to say to us or to ask Matthew. And I wanted to say, when you said earlier conditions of safety, is that the same as grounding to you?
Grounding is one of the ways you can create conditions of safety.
Okay, great.
But grounding is not always, deepening your sense of grounding is not always accessible.
Yeah.
Right. So, but you can create conditions of safety in a number of ways. So basically, when the mind doesn't jump into its controlling role, right, is what I think grounding is. Right. That the mind, your body's the best home your mind will ever have. And so it's the most grounded thing your mind can ever integrate with. And so basically grounding is landing into your body. And once you do, I mean, there's certain kind of, when you think about poses, regardless of the particular pose in terms of sensations, other things start to emerge, like boundary is required for the sensation of expansion, which seems paradoxical to your mind, right? You think, oh, boundaryless means you don't have edges. No, actually, you have to have edges to expand, right? And so there's a whole bunch of ways that when you start realizing what's happening in the poses, right, then you can start to figure out, if I've got a student that can't move their arms or is missing a limb, right? I'm going to have to figure out how to help sensations occur that I better know as sensations, not just as physical movements, right? And so it makes you have to rethink. And when you practice this way, when you practice attention, not just on your physical control, So sometimes I think everyone should practice. So prana, to get back to what you're saying, my prana, whatever that's a flow of awareness. That's a sense of ease. That's a sense of relief. One of the ways that I think about, and I think it has to do with the subtle body, like there's the gross physical body that you get to control and put into actions that are concrete. And then there's the level that's received. So when your fingers were like this in dog pose, I don't think you were part of the sense of direction. You got to receive more when you did this. That difference is including more of the prana when your fingers are open, because there's a sense of direction, right? And that level of awareness, you have to help a student and help yourself. You have to like retrain your ear. It's like it's hearing more than just the physical parts of the pose. And it's more than just studying the philosophy in words. It's like literally recognizing what's actually happening in your poses. So there's a great line by Prashant Iyengar that sums this up pretty well. And he says it in a typical Iyengar style. I can't teach you what you don't know. Meaning that if you don't have a conceptual framework for it, I can't teach you anything. So one real simple way to cash that out would be, I can't teach you German if you don't know any German. Right? Like I can't give you a whole sentence in German if you don't understand German, right? So I can't teach you what you don't know. But what you don't know could be happening, right? So in your poses, there are things that a yoga teacher or the lineage or whatever is trying to reveal to you that is beyond your conceptual framework. You don't have the words for it, right? So I can't teach you what you don't know, but what you don't know could be happening. What's happening at this subtle level might be more profound than your mind can ever know. So I can't teach you what you don't know. What you don't know could be happening. What's happening might be more profound than what your mind can know.
Yeah.
Then the home run line is cultivate the happening.
Cultivate
In
the
other words,
happening.
help a student practice. Practice yourself. How many of us on the call, all of a sudden, the 300th time you did a pose, all of a sudden you had an insight about it? It's like, oh my goodness. Or you hear an instruction, finally, that you know your teacher's been saying for a long time. And all of a sudden you go, oh my goodness. And that is the result of cultivating the happening, right? And so helping someone who has limited physical ability actually listen and go inward, go in to go out, down to go up, recognize the importance of lifting their chest. All those things allow them to hear the asana and do whatever they can. But they're part of the happening of the pose, because another universal principle is you have to develop inner awareness to feel the subtle body, the flow of awareness that isn't directly dependent on muscular action.
Right.
And it turns out that BKS Iyengar's system is ripe with this fruit.
Totally.
You just have to like hear certain things. So another principle of asana might be described as when vertical extension intersects horizontal extension, something important happens. Right? So that would be an example of that. He says it in Light on Life this way. He says, extension requires attention, focus, but expansion is consciousness. And so if you look at a lot of the poses, you're hitting up and down and you're going in a horizontal plane. And when those two experiences intersect, there's an expansion. It's a principle in every pose. So no matter, if I can get somebody who's missing a limb to hit, and they're sitting in Tadasana, if I can get them to hit down with their sitting bones, lift their chest, and broaden across their sacrum, I know sensation will go down the missing limb. Because that's how we're wired, right? So these principles transcend the physical instruction. So I know that's complicated, but that's part of how asana, So what I love about teaching adaptive yoga is it makes me study yoga differently and make me appreciate that what I was learning was more profound than the asanas I was learning, that they were revealing something the whole time. That can be shared.
Yeah, and it makes me think a lot about the idea that, in fact, I just wrote it down this morning, like from another call, that people are just, the mainstreaming of yoga. Here's an idea. What do you think about this? The mainstreaming of yoga, which has gone through the able-bodied, like practitioner, basically in the West. Let's just like isolate it to America. The sort of able-bodied suburban white woman, and then now younger sort of white able-bodied woman, which is, thank God, changing. But that's how it's become mainstreamed. And that's created so much, not just like, sort of information desert as it relates to yoga, but it also creates a lot of delusion around what yoga actually is. Because when the yoga asana, and I'm just sort of wondering what you think about this, when the yoga asana, the yoga pose, like sits by itself in the context of itself, strung along a bunch of other poses, there's like music going and there's like a bunch of other kind of distractions, happening, let's say, that's so disconnected from everything that you have been describing for the last hour.
Yeah,
Right?
but and then stepping out from like the wider discussion of inclusion, you got to make room for all types of students. So
Yeah.
some of your classes should, be what gets them to come to the door.
Well, I
Make them
know.
feel comfortable. But I agree with you that there is, not everyone comes to yoga because they want to be a yoga student. So you got this
Totally.
other level of making
Totally.
it accessible, right?
Totally.
And so you kind of have to, one of the things that I think is in making yoga accessible is you do have to meet the student where they are or what students are. But at the same time, in my opinion, you can't make everything easy. There's limited human learning when everything's easy. And I don't mean physically tough.
Yeah.
I mean, like that's part of it. And if you try to make yoga accessible by making everyone feel comfortable at all times, that might be relevant if you have a room full of very complex PTSD, right? That would be one group I would teach that way. But if I want to invest in the resiliency of my students as they come through the door, right? And in my own practice. And so I know that nothing in my life has ever happened without me having to work at it some. That if we make it too easy, you know what happens? The mind stays on a holiday, right? For the mind to integrate profoundly into the body, our minds are afraid of our bodies.
Of course.
Period. That's just, we find all these reasons to be out of the body. So like some of us, I say yoga's gotten way more popular. I realize, wait, we're probably missing something.
Yeah.
That as mind lives disconnected and doesn't actually try to integrate with body, we probably are going to have more mental illness and anxiety, which is in our teenagers are,
They're showing us. I mean, this is the thing.
Right.
Children show us exactly what's happening in the world.
They're getting, and so it's one of those things where you do have to meet everyone where they are, but at some point, recognizing what's actually happening in a yoga pose. That's why I think I cultivate the happening.
Can I ask a question about that? And say I want to just land this plane in like 11 minutes and have anybody who has any questions for Matthew. This is such a deep conversation and
I kind of apologize for it, but it's a deep subject.
Why? Don't apologize. I think it's so great. I wish we could do this every Wednesday at noon. But basically we're, talking about the universality of yoga asana. That was the title of this session. We wanted you to understand or be taught and learn from Matthew's point of view what that means. That's the subject head of this memo, And then Matthew went on to talk about how, the principles of yoga and the principles of prana do not discriminate, but, you know, yoga poses do. And so you went on to talk about, you talked about a bunch of other things, the conditions of safety, and we went on to the grounding and balancing and the expansion. And I love what you said about Iyengar, that like, you know, the extension requires what, and then what makes expansion. What was that from Light on Life?
Extension requires attention, meaning
Attention.
to extend, you can kind of narrow your focus,
Yep.
but when
Yes,
you
you can.
expand in a pose, that's consciousness.
Consciousness, right.
Yeah.
So, okay, so given that, I want to loop back as a yoga teacher to this one fundamental question I've had like the entire time. Aside from asking if you do practice Shirshasana, if I may ask, I wonder if you do, because I have, so that's just my impression, just curious. But if all poses have a center of gravity and a sense of direction, does every moment in time and space have a center of gravity and a sense of direction? And therefore, when you are doing a yoga pose, you are yourself by yourself, like, you know, whatever, you know, but, or listening to the instructions of a teacher, in both cases, seeking to find and settle into that center of gravity and sense of direction. And I'm just curious, if all of those things are true, does that typically live in the pelvis? Do you teach, do you think about center of gravity, sense of direction from the pelvis?
Well, yeah, I mean, yes, a couple different things there. I would say, is it in every moment, in every aspect of pose? Yeah, it's already occurred. So one of the things I like to say, you know, that is conceptually kind of, you have to open to it, is that it's already integrated here.
That's
Right?
so,
It's already, empty space is already balanced, right? Prana is already equally distributed. It's whether we can plug into it, right? So that's why I think yoga asana is an exploration in congruence. And this is why I think something incredibly important occurred when Iyengar emphasized alignment in such a profound way, right? And physical alignment as a way to get that point across. But so I do think that you're actually exploring what already is here. And that's part of what the yogis, why they go on, I think, to say, you know, our particular life is an illusion, because they want to say, no, something's already occurred here. And it's whether you can realize what's happening, right? And so that's one level of that. Do I think like that it's always centered in the pelvis? I think that helps a lot, especially for standing people. But every, in a way, there's a center of everything, right? Right. So that's going to happen at every level of every pose. You know how like fascia is continuous at every level?
Yeah.
Right. So there's some fascia, but it's all through the muscles. It's all through everything. Right. Analogously, like the center and sense of direction is going to be integrated at every level. Why? Because it's already integrated here. We just kind of can't receive it all the way. And so asana is trying to be a structured attempt to learn how to align our effort and our physical body in relationship to what's already occurred. Okay. And it's because you can actually come in and out of alignment in poses, you can actually, you learn it at a different level. It's like, this ain't no joke. This ain't an abstraction. It's literally true. You know, when Iyengar at 88 was doing Shirshasana back and doing drop backs into pretty Tadasana and going back up, right? And he's doing it for 20 minutes. And that's just not a physical accomplishment. That dude was living in a different plane of gravity than we were.
totally.
Like his inner body was so activated, he didn't require the amount of effort it would take his younger, more able-bodied students to do. He wasn't at war with the space.
And to be clear, I just want to make sure people understand, we're talking about headstand dropping over into a back bend, like at
Right,
8,
and then popping back up.
and then popping back up. And the amazing thing is that 20-minute period, he was known to be in Setu Bandha Sarvangasana, legs straight, no support underneath him, meaning a back bend on your, you know, forearms like, I should just, if I could turn my camera around, I would and show for 20 minutes. And then he'd jump back up. It wasn't even like he was going, he would just
So,
like spend the afternoon doing that.
so one of the things in that story that he was able to do, and it's not like, oh my God, what a physical accomplishment. It's like, that must mean the subtle body is not as constrained by gravity.
Yeah, right.
That means that there's a dimension in our experience that actually can become and happen without extraordinary physical effort.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, what the hell? Talk about a door opener, right? It's like, how is that possible? Getting back to the thing we talked about breath, when I said no, we can't talk about that yet, is that one of the big, when you study prana, and this is going to be hard, it's a hard thing to get across, but like, there's non-breathing aspects of prana. Prana, life force, doesn't care if you're breathing or not. It's going to happen regardless. We like to be breathing, right? It's cool, right? So it doesn't matter whether or not you're breathing. And one of the things that alignment and changes in gravity and a lot of the things, one of, I think, the revolutions of Iyengar Yoga is he introduces how to activate the non-breathing aspects of prana and then layers in the breath.
That is such a great, say that again, please.
So he's figured out, it's a revolution in being able to access and activate the non-breathing levels of prana and then layering in breath. And you want to study both, right? So you ask me, can I do Shirsasana? Yes. You know how, but like, there are a whole bunch of things. Like, for example, this space between here and here, when I said balance your head over your neck, that's part of what sends energy. If you crush your neck down, compress it in Shirsasana, your pose is going to be super heavy. So one of the sensations in Shirsasana is an elongated neck. Why? So you can feel your legs.
Yeah.
Right? What happens when this goes from here to here? Right? Energy goes the opposite direction. Really what you're learning in one of the fundamental things you're learning in Shirsasana is how to move prana or energy from your head towards your feet.
Exactly.
Right. And so if I'm laying on my back and I do this and somebody pushes here on my forearm and I hit into that, I can feel awareness go up through my legs. Well, that's exactly what's happening when you're upside down. Right. And so there are ways to recreate the integral sensations of Shirsasana without going upside down.
Do you do it against the wall, like forearms?
I do all sorts of things.
That is so cool.
Yeah,
That is so cool. So basically,
when you start studying the sensations in poses, you can adapt them.
Yeah. So Jean Marie Clapper, oh my God, hello. After all these years, please email me and tell me how you're doing. But she has a question. We need to end in a couple minutes. This has just been so enlightening and wonderful. The recording will be available for free on YouTube for a week, by the way, and then Weeks Well members and anybody who subscribes to our Patreon, subscriber platform for $5 a month will get this and all the conversations that I'm having these days on yoga lineage, on fostering transformation, and hopefully more conversations to come with Matthew, if I can just rope you back in, Matthew, I hope. So she says, although I cannot for the life of me find the quote, but it is rumored that BK has said that even thinking about yoga is yoga.
Well, but I think there's again, split.
Do you ever visualize a pose? She says, do you ever visualize a pose?
But it's like using those two words already show a bias toward mental energy. So he's trying to meet people there, but there's a line in one of the ancient texts, it's all over Iyengar Yoga, right? But all types of yoga, is that prana follows consciousness more than it follows breath. Okay, so like I've got students that are quadriplegic that went through like 4 years of physical therapy, everything but one guy could never transfer on his own. But and he's physically paralyzed from he's quadriplegic. He can push down through his legs, right? And that actually comes from the underpinnings of mountain pose.
Yep.
The energetic underpinnings of mountain pose. Now, because he's learned how to go down to go up and knows how to do the inside part of Tadasana, it takes less strength for him that he never had because he's paralyzed to transfer. Now he can transfer on his own. It's not that he's thinking about yoga. He's doing the pranic side of yoga, and it's affecting his movement. And so, yeah, you can get benefit. And any teacher knows that when you're teaching a pose, you're kind of walking around doing the pose at the same time.
Of course.
And that's part of what's teaching the students too. Some weird phenomena happens, but don't just think that you're thinking the pose or visualizing the pose. And a more advanced practitioner learns how to access prana more and less directly.
Yeah.
And when that occurs, if you've done poses enough time, you can think them and get benefit.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
it still going to be better to do the whole pose physically? Probably in some ways, but it might create a whole bunch of attachment to the physical pose,
Yeah.
which is rampant
Of course, yeah.
in the yoga out in the marketplace,
I know.
in the
And
asana in the marketplace.
And that's why I was so happy to bring you here, Matthew. I have to say, you're such a gift. And one of the things that Ryan said, we need to end just to sort of respect people's time and respect yours. He talked about how you really began the conversation in this country on accessibility and yoga. Yes, it's a big deal now, and we're so glad and so grateful for all those involved in the effort. But I also, in terms of lineage, I think it's really important to talk about, like, to platform the people who have been thinking and talking and doing these things for so many years, because you have a lot to share with people. And I just would anyway, and so everybody on the call, thank you so much for coming. We've sent you the books, and his thing, and just whatever you want to say to end, Matthew.
Yeah, just in closing, like I started yoga just because I wanted to be a yoga student. Wasn't about therapeutics, wasn't about anything else. I just wanted a seat at the table.
Mm-hmm.
That's all. So it's not so much, it's accessible. It's not, it's like, look, let's figure out deep enough what yoga actually is, so everyone's included.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just how you language things. It's the level of your realization that makes yoga accessible, right? And asana in particular. And so it's like, I just, I'm not trying to fix anybody. I'm just trying to help people that didn't think they could be yoga students be yoga students.
Totally.
Right? And help them feel it from inside to out. And that's what I hope all of you also, in your other explorations of what accessibility means, think about just how do you help someone be a student from inside to out. Right? All right. So thanks for having me, Kim.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. What's that?
Keep on keeping on.
Oh yeah, you too. And I hope that we can bring more Matthew Sanford to the Weekswell platform at some point in the future. And if you would like more of these kinds of conversations, the Fostering Transformation series has been pretty much one-on-one, because I really want to bring these people to you to talk about their lived experience of the definition, practice, and future of yoga. And we're going to take a month off in the Fostering Transformation series in June, and then go on into July, and also in August with these roundtables of many-bodied practitioners, students who are going to come in and talk about their experience in yoga, what they have appreciated in instructions, what they'd like more of, what has changed, what they see in yoga going forward, how it works for them, just basically, platforming the voices of yoga students. So we're just nailing those dates down right now. They'll be in July and August. And if you're interested in the Yoga Lineages series, Stephen Cope and Satbir Singh Khalsa will be coming to talk to me on June 21st at noon. We can continue to kind of do this noon thing. So anyway, Matthew, thank you so much for coming. It's just such a delight to be with you. And we'll see everybody soon. Yeah, thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.